Hello, and welcome to the 10th update video for Silent Hill 2 Enhanced Edition. We've been silent for quite a while since our last update, but that's because we've been hard at work to bring you arguably our biggest and most exciting update ever. We have so much to cover in this update video, so let's not waste any time and jump straight into it. If you're already using Silent Hill 2 Enhanced Edition, simply run the setup tool, sh2eesetup.exe, located in the game's main folder, and select Update Packages. From here, update any packages that have an update available, and you're good to go. If you're using a fan translation pack downloaded from our project site, please be sure to re-download your language pack, as it will contain revisions to make it compatible with this project update. To kick things off, we've gone back and completely reapproached our refinement process for the full screen images throughout the game. Including, in some cases, recreating portions of it in 3D. Let's quickly show a bulk of these images with the before the originals to the new afters. Carrying on to the third dimension, we also put our focus on brushing up environmental assets throughout the game. To start, let's talk about Z-fighting. Z-fighting is when two or more primitives sit directly or near directly on top of each other in 3D space. When this happens, the primitives will fight each other to be the one that is rendered on camera. This results in glitchy looking textures whenever the camera is in motion. Z-fighting can be seen throughout the entirety of Silent Hill 2, if you look closely enough. To address this, we've done a thorough sweep of the game to fix as many Z-fighting issues as we could find. These are just a few examples of the Z-fighting corrections we've applied. While we've done our best to address as many of these spots as possible, do note there might be a few instances left that flew under our radar. While Z-fighting results in glitchy rendering behavior, there are other types of visual glitches that can happen. For example, take a look at this piece of geometry on the edge of the screen. Or the geometry in the distance over here. Or how a portion of this vending machine is totally blacked out. These triangles have incorrect rendering attributes, which results in abnormal appearances. We have gone in and fixed these problem areas as well. Likewise, during this cutscene, the camera's increased field of view results in heavily distracting geometry clipping. Let's slow down this scene to take a better look. Notice how the pieces of the cloth wall are being clipped out. The same can be seen for the elevator buttons, and where the door meets the wall. We've also gone in and addressed these problem areas to fix the presentation of this important, pivotal cutscene.
Open up!
There are some assets throughout the game that can look a bit off, but that's not because of rendering issues as discussed prior. Rather, these instances are due to UV mapping issues. UV mapping is the process of projecting a model's 3D surface to a 2D image for texturing. Here are some examples of UV mapping that we brushed up. The grunge texture on the observation deck's parking lot is stretched and pulled in several spots. And while we were here, we also removed texture seams on the Outlook's wall to make the whole wall seamless. For Cafe Texan, you can see the restaurant's name on their store windows. But for two of the windows, the UVs are backwards, which results in their store name being displayed backwards. In the apartment's bug room, if you look closely, you can see the lid for this bug cage has the wrong texture UV to it. In the same room, the hole that you stick your hand into has stretched UVs along its inner walls. Throughout the hospital, you'll come across double doors like this. If you look closely, you'll see the door's handles and hinges have the same texture applied to them as the door itself. The UVs have been adjusted to have the handles fixed. And in general, we did a light pass on fixing texture seams that caught our eye while playing. For example, the floor in the hallway that Pyramid Head chases you, or the ceiling in the hallway before meeting Laura in the hospital. Again, these are just a few examples of UV corrections we've applied throughout the game. While it's not our goal to fix all UV and texture seams throughout the game, we did want to fix some of the spots that stuck out the most to us while playing. If there are glitchy looking assets that don't fit into any of the previously mentioned criteria, then there's a chance the problem lies with wrong material assignments. Assigning a material to a model tells the game engine how to treat light on the surface of the model. If assigned incorrectly, you can have issues where the model seems to glow, such as the case here with this flower pot. Or in the apartments where you find Angela. The portraits on this wall are abnormally bright compared to their surroundings. Alongside the futongs in this room, they also have a glowing effect which could possibly confuse the player into thinking that they're an interactable item. These are but a few examples of fixing wrong material assignments throughout the game. Sometimes the issue with geometry is that it doesn't exist in the first place. As you play and soak in the scenery of the town, you might find assets that don't exist but should, or assets with chunks missing inside of them. Let's go over a few examples of what we corrected here. While out in the town, if you walk over to this corner, you'll notice that there's collision here to prevent you from touching the corner. And if you zoom in, you can see a telephone plaque hovering in the air. We've restored the missing payphone that goes here. In the apartment's courtyard, you'll come across this fence gate off to the side. When viewing the same gate from the other side, you'll notice that it's missing its chain link texture. We've added missing geometry to the underside of various tossed beds throughout Brookhaven Hospital. And added a ceiling to the bottom room after the long labyrinth elevator ride. We've restored geometry to the underside of this metal barrel behind Pete's Bolorama. And on the same scene, we've restored missing back faces to the fence seen here, which was a recurring issue for many of the fences seen elsewhere throughout the game. And in this cutscene, if you decide to play the game in a 4:3 aspect ratio with cutscene letterboxing disabled, you'll notice a chunk of the telescope is missing. And this cutscene is also a great segue into yet another category of fixes, which are model seams. This is when the edges of two polygons are really close to each other, but are not truly touching each other. This results in seams that otherwise shouldn't exist. For example, take a look at the fabric roof of this hot dog cart. Or this gap in Maria's chair at the beginning of her campaign. There's a seam at the top of the bowling alley that's visible during this cutscene. Alongside a seam here, where the TV isn't fully touching the base it sits on. Oh, and while we were here, we also noticed the base of the TV is floating off the ground, so we addressed that too. These are but a small handful of scene corrections we found and fixed throughout the game. Another facet we looked into is filling voids throughout the game's world to help further flesh out the foggy town. This is where portions of the environment may not exist, or there's an illusion that they don't exist due to obstructions in the way. Here are some examples in how we approach this. If you look between buildings throughout the town, you can find examples of the ground ending prematurely, instead of fading away into the fog. Large spaces between buildings are lined by fences to keep James on the streets. For some of these areas, there quite literally is nothing modeled behind the fences. We've added some small set pieces behind fenced off areas to help sell the illusion that the game world continues beyond them. We've added street geometry to the other side of this wall, which could be seen when playing in a widescreen aspect ratio. Right past the prison bars in this area, you can see the game world abruptly ends, water and all. This is especially noticeable on LCD displays. Our goal here was to extend this hallway and the water to have it fade into the darkness. While possible to extend the hallway, we learned that the water is created and handled in an obscure way by the game, so we were unable to extend the water as well. Our next plan was to place a black gradient texture on top of the water to give the illusion that it's faded off into darkness. But the game engine is very peculiar with how it handles layer transparencies, and this resulted in bugged visuals. This led to the creation of foreboding hallways and corridors leaching out of the darkness and stopping just at the end of the waterline. Upon getting the hospital key in the director's room, we see Laura, glowing brightly, walking through a void. Environmental details have been added here to give her a surrounding to walk in. Speaking of Laura, when she opens the door for James in a hospital, there is now a room on the other side of the door. For Silent Hill 2, and all games in general, it's good game design practice to visually show the player which entryways they can go through. Silent Hill 2 abides by this rule very well, except when it comes to the window in which you cross over in the apartments. This window is totally out of view, so unless you remember this window's location, it may not be readily refound. If you were to move the camera over to show the window, you'll see it's an incomplete asset. We felt it important to have this window in view so as not to break the rules Silent Hill 2 has established for showcasing entryways. To help achieve this, we fleshed out the window to have it properly fit in with the rest of the game world. And on a side note, we also took this opportunity to review the cutscene of James crossing over this window. Take a look at this hallway. There's some light switches off to the side, and there's no blue carpeting near the door. But once the cutscene starts, James is in a totally different hallway, where there are no switches on the wall, and there's blue carpet beneath his feet. We went in and fixed the hallway in this cutscene to match how it looks during normal gameplay for continuity. We also added the bed and broken glass to the other side of the window for added intrigue. Along with the ramsacked, broken window shutter at ground level to further convey the danger of what James is doing. And that brings our focus onto enhancing existing assets throughout the game. Our attention begins at the use of 2D trees throughout the game. For those who look carefully enough, these flat tree textures stand out against the otherwise beautiful 3D environments they reside in. Perhaps the most obvious spot is at the very beginning of the game, where a large chunk of the trees around the observation deck are 2D. As such, these trees have received a facelift to give them depth and dimensionality, quite literally. We applied the same treatment for the 2D trees seen throughout the windows of the Baldwin estate. Along with the trees outside the hotel's windows. For the trees seen outside the hotel's lakeshore restaurant, we reference how they are arranged and seen while outdoors to keep them visually consistent while viewing them from indoors. And on the topic of trees, we did a pass of all trees throughout the game to ensure their undersides will now be rendered the same as their topsides. The wall-sized mirror in the room where you meet Angela was fairly low in texture resolution. This is especially noticeable when the camera gets closer to the mirror. We created a new, higher resolution texture for this mirror to better fit the textural details seen elsewhere throughout the room. And on the topic of glass, we changed this low-resolution, flat 2D image of shattered glass into a 3D asset so that its edges of the glass are nice and sharp. When investigating the strange garbage in the apartment, the appearance of the garbage in-game looks quite different to how it appears in its investigative image. We've remodeled the strange garbage to better match how it looks in its detailed image events. While it's only seen faintly for a few seconds, we wanted to give the island that James rose to in the Rebirth ending some extra love and care. If you look carefully enough, you can tell that the trees and the church itself are nothing more than flat, 2D textures. Here's how this island looks without the heavy fog in play. To bring this island's visuals up to snuff with the rest of the game, We went in and modeled the entire island in 3D from top to bottom. While in the corpse room of the prison, if you look carefully enough, you can notice that the feet sticking out of the holes have no legs attached to them, and at the right camera angle, you can tell that the feet are just floating in thin air. We've added appendages to all the feet to help further tell the story in this room. We've touched up the candle flame seen in Maria's campaign. Before, it looked akin to a mini flamethrower, but now looks more like a candle flame. The save points throughout the game have materials assigned to them to accentuate their pronounced crimson red hue, along with a specular shine to further have them stand out. We've done a pass over the save points to help have this intent be showcased as eerily as possible, as if someone is groping inside your skull. And in particular, we wanted to give the final 9 save points dedicated focus. These 9 squares are a copy and paste of each other. To make it not look copy and paste, we referenced and took inspiration from the Japanese cover art of the game to make the 9 squares unique in appearance. The cutscene that takes place in Hotel Room 312 is one of the most important cutscenes in the entire game. To give this cutscene the attention it deserves, we replaced the somewhat distracting, low-res, pixelated 2D handrail texture in the background with a 3D asset to nicely blend in with the rest of the scene. In that same spirit, we increased the visual fidelity of the decorative fence that runs alongside the hotel's restaurant patio. This looks especially nice during the cutscene with Laura in the restaurant. When James digs into the dirt mound behind the statue of the praying woman, the grass texture is noticeably low resolution with obvious texture seams throughout. We went in and improved the grass visuals for this part to complement the rest of the cutscene taking place. There are many vehicles seen throughout the town as you play, and they look quite remarkable for their time. They all share similar polygon and texture densities that make them fit into the rest of the world perfectly. However, there are a handful of vehicles that James can get close to that are taken straight from Silent Hill 1, released on the PlayStation 1, that don't quite fit in with the other cars. These vehicles are the school bus at the beginning Forest Trail, the gray sedan, red Jeep Cherokee, and station wagon seen throughout the game, the ambulance at the hospital, and the school buses seen in Town West. The poly count and texture resolutions of these vehicles are noticeably less than the other cars and town details around them. We did a pass over these vehicles to have them be more visually consistent with the rest of the game world. And while we were at it, we also restored shadows to these particular vehicles that previously didn't have them. Speaking of vehicles, we also fleshed out the interior of James's car at the beginning of the game. You see the inside of his car during the beginning cutscene, as you approach it to obtain the map, and during the Maria ending cutscene. As such, we felt it important to give the car that brought James to Silent Hill, and thus the beginning of his journey, the attention it deserves. There are a lot of unique visual details seen throughout the Venus Tier's bar in the hotel, but out of all the assets, the jukebox, which is the predominant visual interest of the area, has noticeably less detail than its surroundings. We wanted to give some attention to the jukebox so that it could be on the same visual level as everything else around it. While we were in this room, we darkened the area around the main door to help lend credence to James being unable to see the keyhole. And in order for James to see the keyhole, he must insert a light bulb into the lamp on the bar's counter. We've added a power cord to the lamp, as light bulbs require electricity to light up. And to commemorate this addition to the lamp, we also added a cord to the back of the fallen refrigerator in Woodside Apartments room 303, because fridges, like lamps, use electricity. We put a lot of time and love into the work above, and while we love to showcase every tiny little improvement done here, it would make the video way too long. So we encourage you to do another playthrough of this wonderful game with this new update. And for veteran players out there, we also have an added surprise for you. We've hidden an Easter egg for Silent Hill 1, 3, and 4 inside the game. As you play, see what you can find. We'll give you a couple hints. To start, they're not literal Easter eggs. They're actual items that could be found in their respective games. They could be found by playing normally, no special camera tools are needed, and don't expect to find any big ticket items like the Flaros, Heather's necklace, or a Sword of Obedience, that kind of stuff. We hope this will be a fun adventure and yet another reason for veteran players to revisit this game. With all the exciting work done to enhance the environments, we also wanted to restore another feature that really helps bring the town to life, and that's the flashlight reflection. In the original release of the game, James's flashlight would reflect on store windows seen throughout the town at night. We brought this eye-catching detail back into our project. But took it one step further by including the reflection in other areas not seen in any other version of the game. Now, as you play, you'll be able to see the reflection in other key locations, such as the apartments, hospital, prison, hotel, along with vehicle windows, bringing more visual entry to these areas as well. We're really happy to bring the flashlight reflection back to the game. So happy, in fact, that we wanted to see if we could up the ante with another visual improvement never before seen in the game. Silent Hill 2 is an absolutely gorgeous game whose visual identity stands the test of time thanks to excellent art direction. But it's probably fair to say that the water effects are one of the game's weakest visual aspects. So with this update, we're also incredibly happy to present new and improved water visuals. With these new visuals, you can see the water rippling and moving on the surface, while distorting and refracting the visuals of what's underneath. The overall abilities of what we're able to do with the new water visuals is relatively restricted for a variety of reasons, but it's still a feature that was no small feat to accomplish, and one we wanted to provide for this game that we all love so much. To keep the good times rolling, we're also happy to announce that our project now offers true 60 frames per second full motion videos. Well, for the sake of conversation, when we say 60 frames per second, we actually mean 59.94, and when we say 30 frames per second, we mean 29.97. For all official releases of the game, there has never existed true 60 progressive frames per second videos before. Here's a quick breakdown of the video files from the respective releases alongside our new FMVs.
Anyway? What do you mean, anyway? You don't sound very happy to see me. Anyway? What do you mean, anyway? You don't sound very happy to see me. Anyway! What do you mean, anyway? You don't sound very happy to see me. Anyway! What do you mean, anyway? You don't sound very happy to see me. I was almost killed back there. Why didn't you try to save me? All you care about is that dead wife of yours. I was almost killed back there. Why didn't you try to save me? All you care about is that dead wife of yours. I was almost killed back there. Why didn't you try to save me? All you care about is that dead wife of yours. I was almost killed back there. Why didn't you try to save me? All you care about is that dead wife of yours.
Yeah, but she ran away.
We've got to find her.
Yeah, but she ran away.
We've got to find her.
Yeah, but she ran away.
We've got to find her.
Yeah, but she ran away.
We've got to find her.
In our previous update, we launched a proper 60 FPS mode for the game itself, so we're glad to bring the FMV's frame rate up to the same standard now. Do note, to respect storage size on your computer, we made the intro and story FMVs 60 frames per second and kept the various promotional trailers and end credit FMVs at 30 frames per second, which are not crucial to the game's story, to reduce the overall size of the FMV enhancement pack download. We started this video off by going over big, exciting visual enhancements to look forward to, but we of course haven't forgotten the smaller details. Let's go over a list of what else is new in this department, in no particular order. At the very beginning of the game, when running around on the observation deck, you might have noticed that the distant fog follows you, for lack of a better term. Keep an eye on the fog behind the wall as James runs around. This can even be seen when playing in a 4:3 aspect ratio if you look carefully enough. Since this is your first introduction to the fog, we wanted to ensure the fog is looking its best here. To achieve this, we patched this area so that the fog fills the entire width of your game screen up to a 16:9 aspect ratio and no longer follows along with James like before. We fixed a peculiar issue where, whenever the moths found in the apartments or final boss area are flying over semi-transparent objects such as glass, there's a chance their visuals would be rendered behind the object instead of in front. We fixed an issue where, under the right viewing angles, the various vehicles throughout the town could despawn too early. Glitchy, distracting shadow behaviors in Hotel Room 312, as seen behind Laura in this shot, have been addressed. And while shadow behavior in general is not perfect in this game, the shadows in this spot of the mansion's attic stood out a bit more than the others, so we fixed this area as well. There are two puzzles in the game that have noticeable alignment issues. Let's first take a look at the coin desk in the apartments. For this demonstration, let's do a little video editing magic and have the same coin inserted into all 5 slots. Notice how the coin is shifted and slightly misaligned in all 5 holes. This issue happens with all 3 coins in all 5 openings, so we went in and cleaned up their alignments for a better presentation. A very similar issue can be seen here, in the Mansion's Gravestone puzzle. Once inserted, the 3 boards are all slightly shifted and skewed from one another, and this issue can become compounded if all the boards are rotated before being placed in. We went in and fixed this puzzle as well. Speaking of the apartment coin puzzle, there's also a little visual bug with the old man coin. Once you drop the strange trash down the garbage chute and go out to retrieve its contents, you can see a little gray speck off to the side of the trash. That speck is the old man coin, and, once obtained, it's correctly removed from the game world. However, that coin is actually spawned in from the very beginning. If we immediately go to this area upon entering the apartments, before we ever drop down the trash, we can see that speck, that coin, has already spawned in. We've addressed this to where the coin now only spawns in after the strange trash has been dropped down, and having it correctly disappear like normal upon acquiring it. Here's a quirky one. For Maria's character design, the end of her hair is dyed a muted pink color. This can be seen in her promotional art, in the FMVs, and during in-game cutscenes. However, for her regular in-game model, her pink ends disappear. So we went in and ensured Maria retains her pink tips during normal gameplay. In order for James to access the apartments, he must find a key for a lock on the main entrance, which can be seen on the gate itself. Once unlocked and through the door, the lock is still shown on the gate, as if it was never unlocked in the first place. Not only that, but when you revisit this gate at night, you can then see the lock is taken off the door and discarded on the ground. We've updated this to where the discarded lock is now correctly shown immediately upon entering the gate for the first time. As just mentioned, when revisiting this gate at night, the lock can be seen discarded on the floor. If you proceed to investigate this door, James will say the lock is broken, which doesn't make sense. So for this update, James will now say a more suitable piece of commentary for the gate. This text string is taken from when you try to go back after exiting the forest trail. For the cutscene where James fishes the key out of the shower drain, at the very end of this cutscene, his flashlight seems to glitch and shift locations. This project update addresses this quirk. Silent Hill 2 PC is the only version of the game to include a low health visual indicator, and its inclusion was done for very good reasons. Unlike its Resident Evil counterparts of the time, whenever James is badly injured, he does not broadcast or telegraph his pain through unique animations or groans or grunts. To know when James is injured, you must either be playing using a controller with vibration enabled, with the vibration acting as an injured heartbeat, or periodically check your health status through the inventory screen. Since keyboards and mice do not vibrate, a visual health indicator was included for the PC release as compensation. Team Silent themselves found it to be such a good idea that they did the same thing when porting over Silent Hill 3 to the PC. With a good solution for the problem at hand, we wanted to provide another alternative visual indicator for the effect. So with this update, you can now use a new low health indicator that creates a red vignette on the lower half of your screen. The more injured you become, the brighter the vignette will be, helping to give you a better idea of just how beat up you really are. We just discussed a lot of visual work for the game, so let's shift our attention to audio, as we have some new offerings to discuss here as well. To start things off, we now include a toggle noise for the flashlight. This sound effect was taken from Silent Hill 3 and is a fun audio inclusion for our project. Whenever you load a save point while in game, you'll notice that the sound effect for the loading noise gets cut off prematurely. And in some specific scenarios, the save game sound effect won't play at all. We've gone in and addressed these issues so that these sounds will always play when selecting load or save game, regardless of where the menus are brought up. Whenever you use the mouse to navigate menus in the game, you'll hear the classic select sound effect upon hovering over an option. For some reason, this sound wasn't included when using the mouse in the options and movie menus. So we went in and restored the sound here. We've added an option to have the FMV of the VHS tape play its cut, altered audio instead. We won't play the whole thing here, but here's a preview of that audio. Do note that this option is disabled by default, and you must have the right version of this video file in order for the alternate audio to play. Now, let's shift gears to general gameplay improvements. These are fixes and features that make the overall experience of playing the game better, or help resolve unintended ambiguity with certain gameplay mechanics. First up is melee attacks. For the PC version of Silent Hill 2, light attacks are performed by holding down the attack button, while heavy attacks are achieved by tapping the attack button. This method is counterintuitive to the majority of players out there, so we're happy to announce we have a new feature where these input methods are swapped. Now, press and hold the attack button to perform a heavy attack, and tap, or continuously tap, the attack button to perform light attacks. In the same spirit, we've gone back to the drawing board with the execute animation. In a previous update, we restored James's alternate kick animation to finish off enemies. To achieve this, we made it a 50-50 chance over whether you would receive the stomp or kick animation. Now, with this update, you can fully control which animation you want to perform. On a downed enemy, hold the action button down to perform a stomp, and tap the button to perform a kick. Silent Hill 2 teaches and establishes certain rules to the player early on. One example is interactable items. Unlike other games around its time, the items in Silent Hill 2 do not spin or glow. Instead, so long as James can see the item, he will turn his head and look at it to let the player know that they can interact with said item. However, there are a few areas where this rule is broken, which can lead to player confusion. Let's start with the key behind the bars in the apartments. When entering this area, James will look at the key at all times. This is because the key is being lit from a light source through the open doorway right beside it, which makes it visible to James. However, unless he has obtained the flashlight and has it turned on, he doesn't technically see the key. So even though he's looking at it, unless you have the flashlight and it's turned on, he won't say or do anything with the key. To further add to the confusion here, after James interacts with the key, if you then turn off your flashlight, James will comment about the key. Then, once you're on the other side of these bars, James will look at the key at all times, but requires you to have the flashlight turn on again for him to actually pick it up. Long story short, how you interact with this item is confusing and inconsistent with all other items throughout the game. We've updated this to where James can now reach down and grab the key without needing the flashlight. This was done to keep the rules of the game's mechanics in check, and to help avoid player confusion. James being able to reach for the key before the flashlight has no bearing or effect on the overall game flow of the apartment segment.
Ow!
Ha.
Hey, wait!
Damn it.
Jumping ahead to the hospital, once James acquires the bent needle from the teddy bear, he will continue to look at the bear as if there's more to examine or obtain from it. So now, once the needle is obtained, James will no longer look at the bear. And while we're in this room, James would not look at the shotgun at all, despite it being an important item to grab. We've also fixed this to where James will look at the shotgun until it has been acquired. Being on the PC, Silent Hill 2 uses a mouse cursor to navigate its various menus. For people playing exclusively on controller, this cursor doesn't do them much good and might get in the way. To help out controller players, we now have an option to automatically hide the mouse cursor after a few seconds of inactivity. Please note that this option is disabled by default. On the topic of the mouse, we brought mouse functionality to the few menus where it was never properly utilized, and we're quite pleased with the results. First up is the pause menu. Now, whenever you bring up the pause menu, you can now use your mouse to select options on this screen. The same goes for the memos screen. Once you obtain a lot of memos, it could be a bit cumbersome to only use your keyboard to navigate this list. But now, you can use your mouse to quickly select the memo you're looking for. Even better is that we carried over menu list and mouse behavior from the save screen to the memo screen. This means, as your mouse approaches the top or bottom of the list will begin to auto-scroll for you, making navigation a breeze. We've included an option to have the mouse be centered on your screen upon entering puzzle and riddle images. This behavior mirrors what's seen on the console releases. This is a nice change, as there might be times where the mouse would otherwise be repositioned off screen, and, for those who aren't familiar with the game, might get confused over what to do if the mouse cursor isn't in sight. We've already gone over so many new and exciting features for the game, but we're not done quite yet. Let's now shift our attention to menus and menu options. Silent Hill 2 PC is a product of its time. What we mean by that is that there are certain features and options within its menus that are deprecated and no longer useful for modern technology. A good example of this is the speaker configuration option found in the main options screen. Back in the day, in applications such as this game, could change which sound source Windows was using, but the ability to do this was removed after Windows XP. Nowadays, you, the user, must select the sound source through Windows Sound Control Panel. As a result, the speaker configuration option is quite literally useless and taking up valuable space. To reclaim this space, we're beyond happy to announce a new master volume feature for the game. For all versions of Silent Hill 2, you were only able to adjust the volume for the sound effects and background music. This meant that the audio for in-game dialogue and FMVs would always play at 100% volume. But now, thanks to this feature, you can control the overall game volume through the master volume slider, and then further fine-tune the volume for the sound effects and background music as normal right below. This is a first of its kind for Silent Hill 2. Let's move on to the meat and potatoes of Silent Hill 2 PC's options, which are found in the Advanced Options screen. This screen has some useful features built in, but there's also some features that aren't really needed anymore. The screen position feature isn't all that needed, as modern displays don't really have alignment issues like the CRT displays that came before them. Not only that, but adjusting the screen position could pose a risk with some of our project's fixes. The high resolution textures option is a bit of a red herring. You see, whenever this feature is turned on, the in-game textures look as they should. What I mean is, if you compare the environment texture resolutions here compared to the PlayStation 2 or Xbox, it looks the same. It's when you turn off this feature that things get, well, ugly. Any PC built in the last 15 years can easily handle the default, or what the game likes to call high-res, textures of the game's environments. As such, this option isn't really needed. Looking further down, we see another remnant of years past. The Software 3D Sound option was used to create 3D sound in the game, achievable by software found in Windows XP and some older operating systems. From Windows Vista onwards, the software used to achieve this was deprecated, making this option in the game completely useless. Likewise, our project includes DSOAL, which restores 3D audio to the game on modern Windows software. With these no longer needed options now explained, let's take a look at our new, overhauled Advanced Options menu. You'll see we've done some rearranging to this menu and have now included some great new features in place of the old ones previously mentioned. To start, we now include a display mode option. With this option, you can quickly and easily change between windowed mode, full screen windowed mode, and full screen mode without having to exit the game. Right below that is the resolution option we've added into our project some time ago, but below that is another exciting new feature called render resolution. Render resolution, also known as render scaling or super sample anti-aliasing, is the process of adjusting the internal rendering resolution of the game without changing the output resolution of the display. A factor of 1 is default, or no scaling. When scaled above 1, the game will render its image larger than the output resolution and then shrink the image to fit. For example, if playing in 1920 by 1080 with a render scale of 2, the game will render its image twice as big, at 3840 by 2160, and then shrink the image back down to fit inside the 1920 by 1080 screen. This results in sharp, clean polygon lines and is one of the best forms of anti-aliasing possible. When scaled below a factor of 1, the game will render smaller than the output resolution and then enlarge the image to fit the screen. This can create a blurry, low-res, pixelated effect for a more retro feel if you want to test that out. And at the bottom of this list, we have conveniently included an in-game option to enable or disable the low health visual indicator. To end our discussions about menu improvements, let's reveal our final exciting change. As mentioned before, Silent Hill 2 PC is a product of its time. During its release, PC gamepads were a bit of a wild west in how they and their software drivers worked on your computer. Because of that, most PC games use generic naming conventions for controller inputs, such as button 1 or button 2 to cover all bases. As time went on, the free-for-all of PC controllers became more standardized, which, in turn, made it easier and more predictable to develop around. To get with the times, we're also very happy to showcase our overhaul of the game's control options menu. With this new menu, you now have icons to easily identify which input on your controller is assigned to which game function. By default, we showcase generic controller icons. But if you go into our project's configuration tool, you can change the icons to be Xbox, PlayStation, or Nintendo. Whatever icon set suits you best. And with all of our new and exciting updates, we wanted to get the speedrunning community involved too. With this update, we're happy to announce an official speedrun mode of Silent Hill 2 Enhanced Edition. We wanted to provide a new way to run this game that's mechanically refreshing to the runner, while being audibly and visually refreshing to their audience tuning in. To celebrate this launch, we've dedicated a whole page to the speedrun mode over on our project site that will get you quickly up to speed and easily started with your Enhanced Edition runs. A link to this page will also be in the video description below. Lastly, some additional features that have been added to this update are: we've now incorporated DSOAL into our project, which is used to restore 3D audio for the game. Before, DSOAL was its own separate download package. Now, this feature is implemented into our project and can be toggled on and off through our project's configuration tool. We've improved project support for Linux, Wine, and Proton users. Our project setup tool now includes an optional download package that installs a d3dx.dll stub into the game's folder. This stub forces the game to load our local d3da.dll project file instead of the Linux System 32 version, ensuring better compatibility on Linux. We've added a new automatic option to the cutscene letterboxing feature. When automatic is selected, the game will display letterboxing for in-game cutscenes when played on a 4:3 aspect ratio or smaller, and disable them when played on anything larger. We fixed slow and delayed fading behavior on AMD video cards when playing in exclusive full-screen mode while D3D8-9 is active. We fixed an issue where, if you had the Great Knife equipped before entering the rowboat, your rowboat's speed would be reduced by half. We resolved the subtle issue where the load and continue options on the main menu didn't appear at the same time as all the other menu options. We fixed a quirk where the color of the mouse cursor used for riddles and puzzles wasn't consistent. Now, cursors that should be gray for a puzzle will always be gray, and cursors that should be green for a puzzle will always be green. And we implemented some safety checks to prevent wrong text and soft locks from happening in the next room if you attempt a quick save right before immediately going through a door. And that about wraps it up for what's new with this update for Silent Hill 2 Enhanced Edition. This update is now available to download for you to experience these improvements for yourself. Links and information about these downloads will be in the video description below. The Enhanced Edition team hopes you enjoy this update to Silent Hill 2 Enhanced Edition, and we appreciate you tuning in for today's exciting announcements.